Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead on Porch Time today. We've got light rain, got some heavy rain going to be moving in. This is a couple of days after the hurricane. I mean, it's kind of strange, but still part of the tail end of this thing. It's got my water here. I have to have my cold water because it's actually early in the morning. And it's already almost 80 degrees. The humidity is unreal. It's foggy. Just damp, humid, miserable. Oh, but anyway, on Porch Time today, I want to talk about a subject. Is homesteading? You know, we and I'm bad about it. I'll be the first to admit. Is about calling myself a homesteader. Well, we have to understand that homesteading has changed. Now, I've gone back and I've actually done some research. And I mean, I already knew this because I'd done it before, but I wanted to just go back and do a little bit more research on it. In the True Homesteading Act of 1876, there was only like 8 rules that a person had to adhere to. Now, in order to qualify, all you had to do was not have taken it. You had to be an American citizen, or at least have application for an American citizen. And you had to have not ever taken up arms against the United States. Now, that was basically it. You could be black, white, it doesn't matter. Chinese, Asian, whatever. You could be any of these. You could be a single white woman. You could be anything and apply for these, for the Homesteading Act. Now, the 8 rules, I'm going to read off the 8 rules that you had to have in order to apply for one of these grants to be eligible, I guess would be the better word. And I have them wrote down right here. Number 1 is that you had to be a homesteader. Well, go figure. I mean, you know, you had to want to homestead. You couldn't just do it and not homestead it. You had to be a homesteader. And secondly, you had to be the head of your household in order to be able to qualify for one of these one of these homesteading grants that they were giving out. You had to qualify. Now, before we get into too deep here, I want to talk about before the Act of 1876 for allowing people to become a homesteader. People prior to that got what was called land grants. Now, land grants were predominantly given to military people who served in their country. Now, not all of them were, but the majority of them were given to people who served them in the military in the country, and as what countries were rewarding people, they would grant them land grants. But then later became the Homesteading Act of 1876, came a little bit later. But now, you know, first you had to be a homesteader. Second, you had to be the head of your household. Thirdly, you had to be at least 21 years old, which I guess that's where the 21-year-old age thing still holds true even to this day. To be legal, you have to be 21 unless you're emancipated at a younger age. But now, you have to be, you couldn't just homestead it and not live on it. You had to actually live on the land that you were going to be homesteading. So we see that you had to be a homesteader. You had to be the head of your household. You had to, you had to be 21, and you had to live on the land. Now, you also had to build a house on the land that you lived on. Nowhere have I found any kind of specifications or qualifications for a home or anything like that yet. but you just had to build a house on the land. I know out west, I saw in some of the western places, they had people who built underground houses and stuff like that, and I guess rightfully so because of the climate that was out there. But so far I did not find any kind of building sizes that was required. Now you also had to make land improvements. In other words, you had to improve the property in some kind of way. Now, there again, I did not find anything that that said what you had to do to improve the property. It just said that you had to improve the property. And next, you had to actually farm it for a 5-year period. Now, you couldn't just homestead it and not farm it. I mean, there was rules. You had to meet all these requirements, and all these rules had to be followed, or you could not keep the land. In order to make this homesteading thing come to fruition, I guess would be the best way to do it, you had to pay $18 to make it happen. Now, you could pay $10 and they would hold the land for you. But before you actually got the deed, you had to come up with the full $18. And even at $18, that was still a lot of money for some people to come up with, and therefore they just could not do it. You know, I mean, and then, you know, there was just, even after the Homesteading Act was passed, there was, I don't remember how many, I was sitting reading them, there was like 8 to 10 more acts that were passed after that. I mean, there were all of them called, some of them called, you know, just, I remember one, the Kincaid Act. I mean, there was, I mean, I can't even remember the names of all of them. There was just like a whole pile of acts that was passed after that, that even gave people even more rights to do something, took away some rights. I mean, you could do this, you could not do that. You know, as the government began to step in. Now, the actual Homesteading Act of 1876 actually ended in 1976. In 1976, the federal government wanted to maintain more control over western land, so they done away with the Homesteading Act. The only exception was the state of Alaska. They allowed it to go to 1986. And even to this day, even though the Homesteading Act has been done away with, there is some 27, I think I've got this right, there's some 27 other states in the United States that has enacted some form of homesteading acts. I mean, even today I was looking, even right now, you can go to certain places in Kansas, certain places in Nebraska. I think there was a couple in Ohio, one or two in Iowa, where they still have the Homesteading Act is being allowed to function. But now you have to understand, they're giving away free land, but with the free land comes extreme rules. And usually the land that's being given away is in lots. They're in small towns that the economy has gone on a blank since the North American Free Trade Agreements and all this kind of stuff has came into existence, and a lot of the industries is left in these areas. The people have left the towns. They're like ghost towns, and there's only like maybe 900 to 1,200 people left in some of these towns. And the towns have agreed to give away free land in lot sizes. And there's usually not acreage, it's usually lot sizes next to the city limits. And then there's lots of rules. I mean, you have to build, some of these places you have to build a 1,200 square foot house. Some of them you have to build a 1,400 square foot house. Some of them have golf courses, and you have to be charged X number of dollars every semi-annually to live there. And, you know, I mean, there's just all these rules. You have to live there at least so many years before you do anything. They give you up to 1 year to build a house. Some of them give you up to 2 years to finish it and complete it and be in it. So there's lots of rules that goes along with these, but someone who's just interested in the urban lifestyle and you know, maybe retiring or whatever and don't want to be in a big huge city, hey, I mean, it might be something that's doable for you, because the whole reasoning behind this is to get people to move back into these small towns and help these towns not to become non-existent anymore, is basically what it is. I mean, by them giving you the land, it opens you up to be able to get a loan with enough equity to be able to borrow the money to build a house with, basically, if you want to be honest with it, that's the bottom line. But there is still some states today that act on the Homesteading Act. Now, let's talk about modern homesteading. Now that's the Homesteading Act of 1876 up to 1976. The modern homesteader today is somewhat different than the older homesteaders were. The modern homesteading lifestyle today is about living an organic lifestyle. It's about being self-reliant. It's about being self-sufficient on your home, on a piece of property. Now, it doesn't necessarily specify what size piece of property. Most of it is smaller places. The modern day homesteader is quite different than the older homesteaders were, in the fact that we do it, like I said, we do it smaller, we do it more efficiently, we do a higher output of vegetables and more. I guess you say we do more of an intense homesteading lifestyle. Now, what size homestead you want to have? There's even the modern urban homesteading. You know, there's all these types of homesteaders today that is completely different than the original Homesteading Act of 1876. We have to understand that we can't look down on one another because someone else don't have what we have. They can still be homesteading and not have what we have. Some people can do what's called intense biofarming. You can do intense animals on your property if you know what you're doing and you do it in the right kind of way. I mean, you can raise a lot of chickens, you can raise a lot of rabbits, maybe some goats. You know, the only drawback I would see would be something like cattle or horses or anything like that that required a larger number of, a larger piece of property. You can even do pigs in a small area. But you have to understand that when you do things in smaller areas, that there's a greater parasite issue that you have to deal with. So keep that in mind. But now if you're gardening, you can do a lot of intensive gardening practices in smaller areas, thus still making you what would be classified as a modern homesteader today. The modern homesteader today is more about being self-supporting in the way that they live, being more reliant on themselves rather than a system, being more in tune with preserving your own food, growing a higher, more nutritious, more quality food than you get from a grocery store. There's lots of reasons that goes into doing modern homesteading. Lots of people would rather have better milk to drink. They make their own butters, their own cheeses, their own yogurts. I mean, all these things. It's more about living a more healthy lifestyle, being more sufficient and less dependent on a system that is government ran, I guess you might say. It's not that it's not a real sought after lifestyle by a lot of people today, because on YouTube you'll learn we're trying to build community on YouTube here, a homesteading community, because you go into the stores or you go into town and you start talking about homesteading in a lot of places and raising your own food and maybe raising some animals or some chickens, and people look at you like you've lost your last marble. You know what I mean? They look at you like, why in the world would you do that? Because you can go to the store and get all this stuff for half the price, and you don't have to do anything. Just go to your job and come home and you can go buy it. And yes, there is a certain element of truth to that. But you have to understand what you're eating. What you're eating is basically cardboard. I hate to use that term, but it's the honest truth. By the time you go to a grocery store and you buy food from a grocery store, all grocery store food today that comes from any type of vending services has been irradiated. There's been a certain amount of radiation ran through that food to kill any living enzymes in it that would cause it to spoil on a shelf, thus giving it a longer shelf life. And then when you eat it, your body has to kick up more acid to digest it because there are no living enzymes in it because they've all been killed, thus causing the industry for GERD or acid reflux and all these kind of things. The industry is just booming because of all the irradiation that's taking place in the foods today, because it has nothing in it to break the foods down inside your body. So your body has to create this extra acid to break these foods down, and thus you end up with indigestion, GERD, all these different types of intestinal issues that people end up with simply from having food that's not alive. It's actually dead. That's another reason that a lot of people are doing the modern day homesteading. Me, for instance, I do the modern day homesteading lifestyle because it's healthier. It's more, to me, it's more satisfying. It's very satisfying to me to know that if a life-changing event took place, then I'm not going to go hungry. I know where my food comes from. I produce my own food. I save my own seeds. I feel like that if something was to happen, not much would change for me other than the fact that there might not be any electricity or maybe no gasoline or something like that. A little bit more stuff would have to be done by hand rather than having equipment to do it with. But at the same time, we're learning how here at Deep South Homestead to do more intensive gardening. We're changing our practices and our techniques. We're going back this coming year, as we've told y'all, to a Cherokee type garden. We're going to try to learn some of the techniques of the Native Americans. And I want to say, first of all, thank you to all the people who have sent me seeds from all over this nation, from different Native American tribes. I've even received some that are almost extinct from other countries. Now that is awesome. I can't say enough. We're going to be trying all these. Some of these foods, people, that the Native Americans have that used, and the seeds have been sent to me. Some of these foods last up to 2 years and still are good on the shelf without doing anything except picking them out of the field and bringing them in the house. You know, that's what's amazing to me. So we're going to be experimenting with this coming year. And our goal and our desire here at Deep South Homestead is, in the modern homesteading lifestyle, is to be able to incorporate some of the ancient ways of being sustainable, because guys, they had no electricity, they had no refrigeration, they had no stores, they had none of this stuff. The Native Americans grew their own, and it had to last them from season to season, or else they would have become extinct. They would have died out. So they were successful at it. And I want to get back to using the foods that they used, because the foods that they used were extremely high in minerals and vitamins and all these types of things that the human body needed, because if it had not been, they would have become sickly and weak and would have eventually died out. that is one of the reasons why we're doing this, is we want to try to come up with some very healthy foods that are that require, because see, the Native Americans, they didn't have modern equipment. I mean, they had to work by hand. So I want to come up with some vegetables that can be raised, that is extremely nutritious. I mean, you got to understand, they had low fertilization on their land, because I mean, they might have used fish, they might have used, you know, leaf mold and maybe some different other things. But guys, the bottom line is this: the foods that they produced learned to live on land that had been farmed year after year after year, and did not have a lot of the heavy fertilization that we have today. Today we can go buy nitrogens, we can go buy phosphoruses and potashes, and you know, all these types of the different phosphates and anything that our soils may need that shows in lime and calcium and all that to keep the pHs up in these. Now, granted, there are certain places in the country that that the pH stays up because there's a lot of limestone in the ground. Matter of fact, they have to acidify their soil. And then there's places that the soil is extremely acidic, like where I live at, and we got to be constantly putting some kind of lime into the ground. So what we're doing, guys, is we're just trying to come up with something here that that's very self-sustaining, low maintenance, easy to grow, very prolific, very productive, insect resistant. You know, these are some of the things that we're looking for. Non-GMO, all these things that will make you and me a more self-sufficient homesteader. So I hope you've enjoyed a little bit about Porch Time today, talking about homesteading, because that's where we're actually going with it, is we're kind of get a little bit deeper into this homesteading lifestyle and realizing the sustainability about it. Now, granted, we're, like we said, we're not the old homesteading. We are what's called modern homesteaders. We work under a completely different set of rules today than what was permitted in the 1876 Act that was passed. So without anything else being said, I want to tell y'all thank you for watching Porch Time today, and I hope you have a blessed day, and thank you from Deep South Homestead.